It's the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're talking with Hemant Shilvan, a leader with global experience in innovation, venture building, AI, digital transformation, and digital twins. Hemant previously served as CEO of Bosch Digital Twin Industries, a Bosch venture focused on using AI, machine learning, and industrial data to help companies create virtual representations of physical assets. The company's work helps industrial businesses predict failures, optimize operations, reduce time, and make smarter decisions in complex environments. In this conversation, we'll explore how digital twins are changing industrial operations, what it takes to build and scale corporate venture, and how AI is reshaping the future of manufacturing and connected industry. Hemant, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Hall. Happy to be here.
Very good. Let's talk about why projects fail despite strong budgets. You've been doing this for some time and you've seen success and failure. What causes projects to fail?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, right? Whenever we are talking about new age technologies and including AI, we could talk about simulation. The planning is mainly focused on the tech aspects, right? So it is more like an iceberg. So where only the part that is seen is focused on, whereas there's also the bottom of the iceberg, which is 75%, right? From your governance to security to planning for management, operations, maintenance. These are some things which are not really seen when the planning is happening. And this is where a lot of people get caught and projects many a times fail, especially the AI related projects.
Very good. So, most teams underestimate the hidden 80% of deployment costs, the cybersecurity, the governance, the maintenance, and so forth. How do you avoid that?
So it is very important to look at what is the, let's say, end scenario where it is implemented to understand from a customer point of view where it is getting integrated, like which department, like an IT department, for example, is important to pass it through to validate it. So get the questionnaire first, then you get to know what are the key things that people look at for such implementations. Bring it into place in the design of the product, bring it into place when it is being developed, so that when it is deployed, you have a full end-to-end suite of solution and not just a point solution which is available. With this, we are able to also look end-to-end, right from the governance, regulatory, compliance scenarios, end-to-end operation scenarios, so that we are able to plan well both the budget and the effort to develop and deliver.
So we call that the iceberg problem for enterprise software. How is it the same or different when you move to an AI solution? Does that iceberg get bigger?
The iceberg becomes unpredictable, right? Because with an enterprise, it is known. And if you just search, let's say, the web, or now with the ChatGPTs or Copilots, the Gen AI, you're able to get it. But with an AI problem or a new tech solution where not many implementations are done, there's also less underlying data. Even companies are discovering as they go along that there needs to be additional guardrails, process put in place. So that is where I would say the lean startup methodology works. Work closely with the customer, at least the first lead customer, to develop, understand what is required for that particular implementation as an expectation from their side to really deploy it. Yeah, but typically, I mean, similar to enterprises, cybersecurity forms a major condition which is required. You have the governance mechanisms, which forms a key aspect of it, role-based accesses, data governance, data regulatory norms, depending on where it is being deployed. So I can be in Germany and I can deploy across the world, but each region has a specific data regulation. And we need to ensure that the product release conforms to the data regulation, not just at the point of production, but also where it is being deployed. So these are some aspects where it is very important for the product management to keenly look at what is required from also an end user, end location, end region perspective.
So what buyers see as development costs is only a small visible layer. The operational foundation is where surprises happen. In AI systems, how do you manage this process?
a very important aspect, right? Because we are seeing many companies saying they hadn't anticipated, they hadn't estimated that the cost of implementation would go so high. So in this case, what happens is if you're not able to look at the total cost of operation, it becomes very challenging for a deployment to run within the planned budgets. And here, many a time, the innovation teams, for example, just look at, hey, I have to, as an example, right? I have to deploy an agent. Yeah, for me, what is required? Just placeholder where I can put an agent and deploy. But it's not just that. You need to have metering systems. You need to have governance systems to look at, is it accessing the right data at the right time? Does the right role fit into place? Is it just calling? What happens if the agent goes rogue and keeps calling APIs, right? It just includes cloud costs. So how do you build governance to ensure you can stop something where it is unplanned, right? Where it is. So these mechanisms, again, the guardrails become very important for us to ensure. But it is also important for at an IT level, CIO level, the role of a CIO, CDO becomes very critical in estimating the consumption, in designing, in understanding the design of the system in order to be able to predict the cloud usage, for example, or the operational costs that come into picture when deploying such solution.
So there's always a trade-off between innovation and the business outcome. How do you know that the innovation is going to lead to a useful business outcome or a great business outcome? Because sometimes innovations, they improve, but only by a very small percentage and maybe not even enough to cover the cost that went into it. How do you estimate or forecast that situation?
Thanks, all. So interestingly, during our journey with the customers, right, we came across such solutions where an innovation, for example, is something which at an engineering department level they look at, right? Because they want to show they're doing something unique, innovative, novel. But at the same time, when you're talking about a business outcome, it is at a CXO level or head of plants, head of production, where they are more looking at what impact is it doing at a KPIs related to businesses. And here it becomes important for any business provider, right? A solution provider to start from the business outcome. What am I doing which is impacting? So, for example, if I'm rolling out a 100K solution, right? If it is only adding a business outcome of 40K, then I myself should be in a position to say, guys, I mean, you can use something simpler. This is not really worthwhile. So that is where it becomes very this is basically the product market fit and the customer problem to business outcome, where when we develop a product upfront, we need to start looking at what is the quantum of business outcome that it is going to positively impact, right? So we should, as providers, we should be in a position to say, this is relevant for you or this is not relevant for you. So, because at any point in time, even if you force a customer to implement something, maybe 2, 3 months down the line, when they see that there's no outcome, they will stop it. So why lose an effort on both sides? We might as well be more working at a level where we know what is practical, what is not.
Right. Well, I saw a presentation the other day where a company was taking their current process and putting it online in software, and the question came up: is that the right process we should be using? Is there maybe a simpler process we could be putting online instead of the current one that's in place? And same thing with innovation. It's easy to overfund innovation to get the benefit of it, but would a simpler solution work better?
Yeah. See, always my suggestion to whoever asks me, right, from the experience what we have done, it is always better to start AI or these solutions as a human assist solution, because the conditions in which it operates, only humans know, right? It's not always highly predictable. It's not always highly structured. So in which case, we are, whether it is with the digital twins or the agentic AI that I'm now working on, we always look at how to build in the expertise into the system for AI, but at the same time, critical decisions are still made by humans. However, what is helping here is AI can actually shortlist and say, instead of hundreds of options, this could be the 3 or 4 options from which you need to select. You tell me, because all these 3 or 4 has worked in, let's say, 20%, 30%, 30% of the cases. So you select based on your case what works. well. It can give a recommendation, especially for critical process, versus a highly automated, repeatable process like a ticketing, for example, like taking a decision on reporting. These are things which an agent can do by itself, right? You don't need a human intervention. So you need to take a conscious call on where to bring in AI autonomously versus where to bring it in as a human assist system. And any transformation happening, our sincere recommendation is to have it as a human assist system.
Great. So we often want the best technology possible, but when is it better to not use advanced AI, but maybe a simpler model or lower cost one?
AI could be in multiple modes, right? So you could have AI, which is a pure play mathematical formula, right? Simple, that's one giving machine learning, sorry. And then machine learning could be a statistical formula. It could be a very complex algorithm. It could be a support vector machine, for example, or it could be highly complex neural networks, right? So depending on the application, depending on the data points, this number of signals coming in, and what is the outcome required, it is very essential that we determine what is the kind of data that is coming in, what is the kind of operations that we need to do on the data, and what is the outcome that is coming out of it to determine which model has to be used. It also is highly influencing the costs, right? Whether you use a high frequency data, whether you use a low frequency data, how often do you need to really call the APIs, how many signals have to be input. So these are all factors which influence what kind of algorithms that we would need to use. But at the end of it, the business outcome and the cost, influencing the cost, I would say should be the prime driver. Where if you're able to do it with a simple algorithm, with a simple mathematical formula or statistical formula, just do it with that. Yeah, we are also saving a lot of carbon footprint with that.
Very good. So, there is a lot of new AI technology coming into the marketplace. How do you translate that technology into business value? How do you know it's really going to give you the outcome you're looking for?
See, here's this is where what we did is we ensured that when I was running the startup, right? So the venture, there was a good balance between domain experts who knew the industries, solution consultants who could actually bridge the domain or the industries to a software package or a software component to the AI and this one. And then you had the data scientists and the developers who could actually implement this design into a deployable software. Typically, what we have seen, I mean, now it's changing, but typically, what at least I had seen was that people used to get only data scientists together to develop a platform, spending a lot of money without looking too much into the domain, onto the business, right? Because the real scenario of how it is in a production plant, for example, an industrial, is only known to a domain expert. So it is very important to have a good balance in the team of domain experts, of solution consultants to bridge the domain to the software and the software implementers. This is very important. Domain experts work with the plant team to look at the business outcomes and provide a system level design, and the solution consultants look at the feasibility of implementing that system level design into a software design. And then the software design team actually takes that and implements it with the necessary guardrails into a deployable software.
So how do you start with the pain point or the KPI or cost of failure rather than the model or the tool set? It's easy to get caught up with the technology, but the business outcome is being driven by how we solve those original issues. How do you build that into the process?
Yeah, two ways, right? So if you look at the lean startup method or a customer discovery, it becomes very important for us to do the initial, I would say, customer interviews or even discussions, attend events. They're very openly, roundtables where they're very openly discussing on the current pain points, right? Don't hesitate to talk to a COO or a CIO or a CDO on what is it that they want to get out of an AI. Many of them say, hey, I want to have 15% improvement in OEs, right? Not possible. But can you give a consistent 3% or 5%? Yes, definitely possible. So be aware of what is it that is possible within the industry and be aware of what can we do with AI. Definitely, because with, let's say, human efforts reduced, right? With repeatable, you can definitely save certain amount of money. But at the same time, if you're saying that because I'm implementing AI, I can actually give you a zero error, that's not possible because many of the things cannot be are not in our control, right? So it's important to understand what are the KPIs, for example, OEE, mean time between failures, MTTF, productivity, what is efficiency, what is it that we are looking at to improve. Take one or two, not more, and focus on that to build a solution which can actually target to improve that, right? I cannot take 10 different KPIs and say with one solution I will actually cater to 10 different. Maybe you can start building, but start with one or two. That is very important. And involve the team, the plant shop floor personnel, as a partner to do the implementation, because it is very critical that it is their area, their turf, and they're the ones who can really give you the best possible key inputs or insights into where you can actually enable them or help them to add value.
So there are many AI startups that are coming in to help build out these systems. What's the role of domain expertise in an AI startup? How much do they need to know before they can be effective at deploying it in a specific area?
Very critical, I would say, right? So basically, when in my first venture startup, which was on retail, along with the product head and the business development, we actually spent close to 5 days with the key team, including marketing, CXOs there, to understand what are the key KPIs. And then you understand that they're not measured by APIs, right? They're measured by how much of increase can you do in a basket value, how much of cross sell can you do, how much of upsell can you do. So learning the terminologies of the industry is very important, and this also helps us to look at how to design a system which will directly influence these terminologies, right? These KPIs. Similarly, in unit, basically understanding what is a downtime, right? What is the cost of failure? For example, when we were doing digital twins, there were bearing failures. And many people will say, hey, bearing just costs you $20, $30. So why do you worry about a bearing failure? But if there was a bearing failure which was in the center of a huge machine, we have seen that in a few cases, the cost of failure could go up to 50 million USD, right? Because you needed the experts to come open the machines, and these experts are not available in that location. They have to be flown from somewhere. And all these aspects are not regarded. So that is where domain experts can really add a value, telling that if there is a failure of this component in a machine, what could be the total cost of loss? Yeah, what could be the total cost of the failure? And they could also help with understanding what are the key machineries, for example, which are there, right from a process point of view. For example, a line which already has a backup is less risky than a line which is very proprietary and doesn't have a backup, because there's one machine which is so expensive that if that fails, it is wrong. So then really build a scenario for that. If you have 10 motors can be easily replaced, right? So don't worry too much unless and until they are actually feeding into a line which is very critical. So this kind of assessment of the entire process line, the entire line, is also important, which is where the domain experts can really add value, especially for the new solutions.
Well, these projects are gated by many different factors, but one of them is digital maturity. What do you find there with companies that are more mature that makes them go faster than those that are not?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very critical issue even for the companies, because what we have seen, I've had discussions at different companies in different regions, and many of them have different plans at different maturity levels, right? Some of them are legacy plans, which have legacy systems not entirely connected, versus the same company has a new plant which is completely digital, which has a command and control center, which has this one. So here's the problem is, how do we bring all of it together in a way that the C-suite or the key providers have a look at the solutions which is in the at a same level or at a same view, right? And this is where it becomes imperative that we work with different partners, who system integrators who have that capability to do the assessment of the digital maturity, and bring it all to a level through various methods so that from there on you can actually build the solutions. And typically, while doing an estimation of the solution, these things are also disregarded because they just look at one plant, let's say, which is highly digital, and say, hey, this is my code for you for 10 plants. And then you go and see the 10th plant and 8th to 10th plant have no digitization, but you have signed a contract. So, what do you do? So, that is why it becomes important to get this information upfront, saying what is the level of digital maturity of each of your plants, and based on that, you actually look at how to deploy the solutions.
Well, related to that, we find that sensors, connectivity, data readiness, and even architecture often determine success before the AI layer even matters. How do you manage that aspect of the project when it may be outside your scope?
Yeah. So the what we did, we used to do three, I mean, depending on the size of the plan, but 3-4 hour to a 2 day pre-discovery. We call it as pre-discovery study of the plant, where the domain experts would go visit the plant, let's say their key plant, and do a real worthwhile check on what is the status of the digital maturity, which digital solutions are there, how are the sensor components, what is the connectivity that is available, are there units, for example, you have a good digital presence but none of the data is accessible, right? Then of course it's again no use. Then they have to talk to the data provider of the machines, get the data access. So this is where we did this consulting study and generated a blueprint, and with that blueprint, you used to tell this is what we observe. And to make it to a maturity where it can be deployed, these are the things that you need. Some of them needed sensors, some of them needed, let's say, connectivity layer, gateways. Internet could be bad, so you needed a better data flow there coming in through the internet. So all these things were something which we provided as a part of the consulting study or a pre-discovery study. And if the customer said, yes, I'm ready to invest, good. We had partners who were system integrators who could do it, or the customers could do it by themselves with their partners. Or if they say, hey, no, I don't want to invest so much, then we used to say thank you and also step out.
Oh, great. So, what's your framework for evaluating AI investments? How do you manage that aspect of the work?
A framework of AI investments in terms of what? So, for example, innovation or at the customer level, is it?
At the customer level, is the cost
Yeah.
to
Okay.
benefit analysis you have to make, is it worth putting in? Is it not? And it's going to be a time commitment, and there's many aspects of that, but just understanding upfront what we should be considering.
So the AI investments, right? So one, it's very important to rope in all the key people who are necessary for taking a decision, all the key functions which are necessary for taking a decision. Many a times we had seen that, for example, was not at all roped in, and people only spoke to chief digital officer or engineering heads, and they discussed, agreed on the implementation. And at the end moment, after 3 months, for example, the IT guys said, hey, sorry, I cannot allow you to do it, right? Either because you're using something where I cannot whitelist the IP. So it is very important to understand the entire end-to-end process flow on who are the key stakeholders who could actually be a part of decision making, who are the key decision makers, who are the influencers, who are the detractors in a scenario, understand from them, and also understand the budget that they're willing to allocate to this. So we have also seen companies which say, hey, this is only, let's say, 50K solution, why don't you take it? And and that is an innovation budget for many companies. They would just go ahead. But when it comes after, let's say, a 3-4 month or a 12 to 18 weeks sales cycle, right? Even more. But then after that is done, when they want $1 million budget, these guys say, hey, that's not in my purview. You have to go to the CXO or head of plants. And this again is another 8 to 9 month sales cycle. So that is where what we have done, what I had actually pushed is tell the customer the entire budget. If the pilot succeeds, this is what you have to pay. Get an agreement upfront from the key stakeholders. So with this, they have to rope in the key decision maker upfront with all the conditions which come in. And if they then agree, then roll out the pilot. Yeah, roll out the pilot, but also get a buy-in on what are the KPIs that they want to see succeed at, right? Which are the KPIs? If it is successful, they will go on to the full rollout, get an agreement and plan it well so that you have the key decision makers, you have the budget, and then you are spending an effort which will help you to acquire the customer.
So how do you assess the total cost of failure, the total cost of ownership, and whether the solution is proportionate to the problem you're trying to solve? How do you approach that?
Yeah, that is where these key decision makers actually, when we have the discussions, we sit down for workshops. We understand from them what are their key gaps or leakages today, right? Where are they leaking money? What is it that they want to save by implementing AI? And we do a realistic analysis of how this can actually help them with a return on investment, right? Is it practical? Is it not practical? What are the control points which we have a control of versus what are the control points where even if you implement certain solutions, it is of no use, right? So this is where it actually adds a big difference. It makes a big difference where you're looking at bringing in the key aspects of budget, the key problem statement, what is the leakage happening, the total cost of failure, which is where the domain experts work with the plant guys to really understand the reality. And then we work on how AI as a technology, for example, can help to resolve this to a larger extent, to help save or bring efficiency to a larger extent.
So what have you learned from rebuilding for modularity? How did that come about?
Yeah. Typically, when AI started, right? I mean, not only AI, this also started with enterprise solutions where platforms played a major role, right? Where companies invested in platforms, built it for 2 to 3 years, investing huge sums of money, and then started selling the platforms. But with AI, with so many changes, both from, let's say, with the different kinds of LLMs coming in, with the different kinds of neural networks coming in, it is no longer possible that someone invests for 2 to 3 years and then take it to the market because then it would be obsolete. So that is where the modular play becomes very essential, where you go in an incremental way. You start building modules which are deployable within 6 weeks, right? Less than 6 weeks. And then the value of that module, you already start seeing within 3 or 4 weeks from then, right? That is when these modules are more like Lego blocks, right? You can actually add modules to each other. You can start building it on top of each other. You can start fixing it, connecting it laterally, vertically, horizontally, diagonally, so that this becomes easier to expand. We call it land and expand. So you land with one module and then you expand with the other module. It could be features, it could be at a regional level, it could be at a plant level. So that is why it becomes very important to use the modular approach to scale. And for a customer, they get a module which is smaller, faster, but at the same time, which is not a POC, right? Which is a real working solution. And they can just keep adding the same blocks on top of each other to scale. So it is predictable. It becomes predictable and repeatable.
So how's moving from a monolithic enterprise stack to a modular offering? How does that reduce buyer friction?
See, with the monolithic structure, monolithic architecture, what happens is you either need to have a customer where you deploy with them, where you start building it with them, not as a SaaS, but it is highly locked to the customer system, or you need to have something completely transformational and like the Gen AIs, right, where you have it everything up and running and you are the first runner into the market with this system, but there's a huge investment required versus a modular architecture where, especially for SaaS solutions, with a modular architecture, it's very easy to not just deploy but also manage the systems and upgrade with the updating technologies, right? You can say, hey, I invested so much. If I need to completely move all of it, if I need to displace the current, let's say, licensed software that I'm using and bring in other, it's much more easier. So that is where architecture really helps for both the provider and the consumer.
Well, so how should scalable AI companies think about business model design? What should be top of mind there?
So the business model becomes an important aspect, right? So whether you run it as a project mode, and there I would say it depends on the application. If the application requires a lot of effort on customization to the end plant, if it requires a lot of time and material effort to make it happen, then project mode is good. But typically with the AI softwares, we are seeing more and more that if it is a project mode, customers would rather build it themselves and not go with a provider. Versus if it is a SaaS mode, yeah, software as a service, platform as a service, then customers are willing to directly just pay a subscription, test it out, validate. If it works, they continue. If it doesn't, they move out. That makes it easier for them. They look at the desirability. We call it DVF for desirability, viability, and feasibility. So they look at the DVF aspects, and if they want to continue, if they're getting value out of it, they continue, or they just stop it or go to another provider. So that is where it becomes easier for the end user, the end organization to take a decision if it is modular, or
Well, in the
if
last
the
few,
business model is, let's say, it is not OpEx, but it is more SaaS based or the new age business models.
I see. Okay. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here today, what else should we cover that we haven't?
What I would like to stress on is it is very important for both the consumer to understand what are the capabilities. For example, an organization who is going into the an AI mode, implementing AI, to do a thorough analysis of what is the real capability of an AI for the problem that they have, and also the provider to be one respectable and open in discussion with the customer to say this fits well, this does not fit well, but at the same time also invest in understanding how to solve that problem using technology. And that is where a balanced team really plays a major role. Bring in experts, so not just from AI, but domain experts, key experts who know what is in the field, what is on the floor, and bring them in to help resolve. Finally, what matters for these new age solutions is work together. Work together as a team with a mutual benefit on both sides, and that is what can help both sides to have a effective, efficient, and successful, profitable solution on both sides.
Very good. So, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
So I'm available on LinkedIn, listed as Hemant Shilwant. Would be happy to connect with everyone there and look forward to a good discussion as well.
All right. We'll include all your contact details on the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow up soon.
Thanks, all. Thanks for a wonderful discussion. Quite curious, inquisitive, but at the same time, very relevant for the time. Thank you very much.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.